Greetings and welcome to the fourth review in our What's Smoking Hot 2020 video review series. Today I'm going to look at the Hoyo de Monterrey La Hoyo de Rio Seco. It's quite a mouthful. It's a recent 2018 release and it it's had great reputational consensus amongst enthusiasts since its release. And in this review, I'm going to discuss why it stands out amongst enthusiasts, and I'm going to be comparing it to the most recent release in the La Hoyo line, the 2014 to San Juan, and compare the two. And I'm going to also compare this cigar to other La Hoyo cigars. Now, I've gone ahead and lit this up, and construction-wise, the ash is a little bit flaky and it's a little bit white. More wider than standard, but it is smoking quite well. There's a lot of smoke per puff. On the cold draw, I got very typical La Hoyo flavors such as wood, clove spice, and forest fall flavors. And smoking is now in the first third. Those flavors are pretty much the same type of flavors I'm getting through that first third. Now, let's talk about the ring gauge of this cigar because it's quite big. It's 56 ring gauge by 140 millimeters in length, which is, I think it's about around the 5.5 inches. So it's quite a big cigar. And one thing that I tried to do was make a really good cut at the back. So I used my Zyka XO cutter, which is a quality dependable cutter. And the reason I mention this is because I haven't had ideal experiences with cutting these larger ring gauge cigars unless I've used better cutters. When I haven't opted for a straight cut on these larger ring gauge cigars, I've gone for my Credo 3-in-1 punch cutter and punched the back with the largest punch cut on that cutter, and that served me well. But look, I can't emphasize enough how important it is with these larger ring gauge cigars to make a good cut, because I find on the smaller cigars like the 42 ring gauge, or dare I say 46 or 48 now, that the average ring gauge of a Habano cigar is much larger than in the past. I feel that when you make a cut, it's a little bit more forgiving on those smaller cigars, but on the larger ring gauge cigars, it's not. So I made sure that I took time to cut it properly. Now, the one flavor aspect that this cigar, this La Hoyo de Rio Seco cigar is been known for amongst enthusiasts, is its creaminess, frankly. That's what's made it stand out. And what's interesting about it is it's been creamy from a very young age. If you compare other La Hoyo line cigars, even the current ones we have and the ones from the past, they were known for taking quite a bit of time to develop that creaminess, but this seemingly has had a creamy texture straight from the get-go. And like a lot of other 2019, 2020 cigars, it's smoked really well at a young age. The other flavor that's been characteristic to this cigar has been like a sweet ginger spice. But I've got to say, through smoking through the first third, I haven't really had too much of a sweet ginger spice at the moment. I'm getting more of a slight savoury clove spice and more of those forest floor savoury flavours that are more typical for a La Hoyo cigar. Also a little bit of cedar, that's definitely there. But I'm really happy with how that's smoking. I think the ash is, even though it's a bit flaky, the ash ridges are quite good. I'm just going to pause the video and come back in the middle third and discuss this cigar further and compare it to other La Jolla releases, both current ones and from the past. So I'm down into the middle third, and some of the flavors that I'm picking up, I guess I felt like it is a little bit sweeter, so you can call it that ginger sweetness, or perhaps going over towards licorice. So it is there now. Still has that cedar and forest floor core to it. And yeah, definitely that creamy texture. So if we look at the La Jolla line itself, it was always noted as um, it was distinctive to other standard Hoyo cigars in that they tended to be more woody. Uh, when young, they could have that spice, that clove spice, those forest floor flavors, um, perhaps mushroom. And the appeal of them amongst enthusiasts was uh, in resting managing them long term, you'd get a nice cream texture come out in them, and they they would develop a really refined uh, quality, uh, simple cream and cedar flavor to them, especially the Dadu, which is probably the, the most sought after out of all those. Sadly, that was deleted in 2014. Um, the other cigars in the La Jolla line that were had been discontinued was the most recent one was the early 2017 De Prince, which was almost a Mareva size. I think the name of the vitola is Azu Azu Emos. I think that's how you say it. It's like a just slightly smaller than ring gauge, around the same length, 40 ring gauge by 130 millimeters. In 2013, the Slim Panatella de Gourmet, which is about half an inch longer than Pularanga Monte Carlos, 33 ring gauge by 170 millimeters, was discontinued. The Corona size de Roy was discontinued in 2009, and before that, in 03, the Laguido number 2 size even had a pigtail on it, like a Monte Cristo Specialis number 2 or a Cohiba Corona Specialis, a 38 ring gauge by around the 6-inch mark cigar. But that was deleted so long ago that the Dodorphin never came out with a ban. In fact, before 2005, 2006, none of these La Jolla cigars had bans, believe it or not. And quite a number of them were offered up, were packaged in 50 cabs. Just goes to show you how much has changed in a short time frame. A number of years being only what 10 or 15 years. Yeah, 10 or 15 years. So quite a lot's changed, if you're thinking about the La Jolla line. But for us enthusiasts, if we're looking at the Rio Seco, you're probably wanting to compare it more to the current La Jolla cigars, and we'd have to split those into two categories: the smaller ones and the larger ring gauge ones. And the two smaller ones are the Entre Arctos 30 ring gauge by 4-inch De Mer, and the Deputy which is almost a menudo size. So if you think of a menudo size cigar like a San Cristobal de la Habana or Principi being 42 ring gauge by 110 mils or 4 and 3/8 inches, the Dudipide is 4 and 3/8 inches in length, but it's slightly smaller ring gauge, 38 ring gauge. So you've got those two smaller ring gauge cigars, and you've got these two larger ring gauge cigars on the La Jolla line, the 2014 the San Juan and the 2018 the Rio Seco. And look, what's the difference between the De San Juan and the Rio Seco? Uh, Simply speaking, apart from the fact that the De San Juan's about 2/5 of an inch longer and 1/32 of an inch smaller in circumference, being 54 ring gauge. The De San Juan, when it came out, and I still think even recent De San Juan, it carried on that tradition of needing time to build up in its creaminess, which the Rio Seco hasn't been like that. And I found that the De San Juan, when they were younger, had more or has more, is more toasty, and it's more has more tea flavors, for for want of a better term, the best way to describe it. That I would never describe the Rio Seco as having the same type of tea flavors. Now that's still ash-wise, the ridges are pretty consistent, and I'm pretty happy with how that's smoking. Still a lot of smoke per draw. I've got to be honest with you, I do wish it was slightly creamier, and it had slightly more ginger spice. But look, it's not bad how it is. I'm quite okay with it. And in fact, my last De Rio Seco wasn't even as good as this one. That was just okay. Um, Mainly because that was more sandalwood and more. It didn't have the cedar and the creaminess that I admire in this cigar. Um, this has got a bit more of that. But I'll be honest with you, I'm just grateful that I can get a Hoyo cigar. Um, Smoking this with this much amount of creamy texture so young. This is only a 1.5, 18-month-old cigar. I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to come back in the final third and just give you some concluding thoughts on the cigar. So just coming into the final third. And one other thing that I did want to say was that we've discussed in many of the reviews that I've done over the years about Habanos SA's propensity to move towards larger ring gauge sizes. And you would think there'd be more ring cigars of this ring gauge, but surprisingly, I had a look on Cuban Cigar website this morning, and whereas say the average ring gauge of Habanos cigars has moved from 20 years ago to being 42 ring gauge, 2/3 of an inch round in circumference, to I would say today it's more around the 48 to 50 ring gauge. A lot of the newer releases are all within the 50, 52, 54, 56 ring gauge. There's a lot more special releases that have been released in 56 ring gauge, but of regular production, the first one was the Cohiba Bahiki 56. Recently, we had a premium line addition to the Romeo and Julieta marker, the Linea Oreo Nobles is a 56 ring gauge pure meaty cigar. We had the 2015 limited edition, the H. Upmann Magnum 56, and also the year after that was the Topaz, which was also 56 ring gauge, and now that's become regular production. But if you look really at just your standard regular production cigars, it's this one and the 2019 Topaz. But one caveat I've got to add in smoking the cigar today, with this much smoke to the cigar, and it's been consistent all the way throughout it, uh, I've got to tell myself certainly just slow down on it and take smaller puffs. And when I've done that, I've got a little bit more of that creamy texture on my palate than if I've taken larger puffs. But if I was to compare this to the previous video review that I did in this video review series, the Hoyo de Monterrey Epicure number 2, certainly a very different cigar to that. Sure, they're both Hoyo de Monterrey, but yeah, you could tell there's a difference between the La Hoyo and the standard Hoyo de Monterrey cigars, even though both are considered by Habano SSA as being lighter in profile. If you've been fortunate enough to acquired this cigar during 2020, you'd know for yourself how well they've smoked straight out of the box, and they continue to be popular on our forum. And look, and I believe rightly so. So look, even despite the larger ring gauge, I'm grateful that we have a La Hoyo cigar that you don't have to age for 5, 6, 7 years, even longer, to get that creamy texture out of them. They've been good to go within 12, 18 months. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I look forward to seeing you again in the next review. Until then, happy smoking.